within these, I don't know, as I said, about 800 pages, there's one small piece on the stranger. And it is known as such. If you ask people, sociologists, they know probably the stranger, but they don't know that it is part. Many will not know that it is part of this volume. Construction of social forms. So this was the idea of Zimmer, and the stranger being a form of the social. Now, we will come back later to this, the social, what it actually means. And it is a general topic, the stranger, now under different forms, but in a way in social science, we always, or kind of always, deal with the stranger, with the outsider, with the me and the other, and try to look in this field, if you want, where are we actually standing? And there was one of the topic actually, somebody thinking about writing about the PhD students and the role of the PhD student. To be a PhD student, the role of third-degree studies in the perspective of graduate students. I don't know who it is, but I thought it's interesting actually that at some stages, sometimes, we should actually look at what is happening within this research. And not introduction of myself, but it is a kind of personal issue that I studied in Germany, in both parts of Germany. At the time, there had been two Germanys. I worked there for a year or something, and then I left. And since then, I'm stranger. I worked in Ireland, I worked in China, I worked in Taiwan, I worked in Russia, I worked in, I don't know where, Austria, no, in Poland. So in this way, it's a kind of personal story. And it's another kind of personal story that I studied sociology, political science, economics, and others, philosophy. So in a way, wherever I go, I am the stranger. I worked before I came here in a law institute, working on legal issues, and of course nobody really accepts me, because I'm not just a lawyer. Same with economics. If I turn up in economics, I've been teaching economics in China, people saying, well, but you are not really economist. And sometimes I think, yes, that's true. At least I don't feel limited in a strict sense and say, okay, I'm doing this and I'm only doing this and nothing else. As I said, it's a frequent issue, a frequent topic, the stranger in different forms, the individual. Norbert Elias, another person, worked on the entire field under the main work was the civilizing process. The civilizing process, understanding it or trying to understand it on the two things of sociogenetic and psychogenetic investigations. So it is the social and it is the individual, the psychological process. And this is, in a way, one of our difficulties in social science. We always take one part out of the entirety, specialize on this, look into the investigation of sociogenetic issues, and forget the other side of psychogenetic issues, or the other way around. And this was, I think, a genius of Norbert Elias, working on this major book on civilizing process. There's a little bit a side story to it in terms of the translation. You will read definitely a translation. And there is a story about the English translation, that within 10 years it had been retranslated, more or less by the same people, saying, no, this was not what he meant. We have to think about it in a different way. And okay, there is the one language problem, but the other thing is, I think it is difficult to translate it, because the translation goes with the traditional understanding of what the individual is. And the individual is exactly the one person on her own. Where if you read another piece that is Society of Individuals, you will feel it's something else. It's not this isolated individual, but it is immediately the same. At the same time, it is society. It is within society. And vice versa. You cannot understand this society without understanding what actually happens to the individuals. So it is this close interdependence, which I think he really grasped in an excellent way. And then, of course, not ending literally with it, but talking at some stage, writing a book on the loneliness of dying, where it comes really to this still a sociological issue, but this is the moment where are you really on your own. So I can only recommend, if you have time, if you enjoy reading, especially if you enjoy reading books, which is not so common anymore, but to read these voluminous works. And there's another one which is actually more or less recent, from the 60s or 70s, that's Richard Sennett, on the fall of public men. And there you have another point of this, the public man. We are living in public. We are living as part of a society, whatever it means. And he actually looks at it, at whatever it means in these terms of it is public, but there is no public space that is predefined or defined in a fixed way, that you can say, okay, I'm going into the public now. But this is a shifting field of culture, of understanding ourselves within culture, how we react, how we interact, where in many cases exactly these different points come together, that we are acting in economic terms, that we are acting in social terms, that we are acting in cultural terms, and there are no clear borders. And in this way, we are, I would say, always strangers. If we are approaching sociological or whatsoever questions, we are, in a way, always strangers. Now, the problem is that, of course, there is one point where we don't feel this anymore. We are, it's so much a habit. Our relationships, our identities, the thinking of ourselves is so much habitualized that we don't feel it anymore. And in a way, it's true. We are not strangers in this moment. We are just encapsulated in this situation. And this is the danger. We are getting just used to what we do. We are not thinking anymore about it, which is necessary. Because if we would think every minute, every second about everything that is possibly involved, it would drive us mad, literally. We couldn't cope with it. So we have to look at something, how to manage this multitude. And there is this, coming back to Georg Simmel, this figure of the stranger, quite interesting, that he said the stranger is actually not the stranger in the sense we usually deal with it, as a person that is coming, we briefly get known to this person, and then this person leaves again. So a quote, if travel as the loosening from any given point in space is the conceptual opposite of the permanence somewhere, the sociological form of the stranger nevertheless represents the union, so to speak, of the two conditions. Admittedly here also representing the fact that the relationship to space is only the condition of the relationship to people on the one hand, and the symbol of it on the other, the symbol of the stranger. Thus, the stranger is not understood here as wanderer, the sense in which the term was used in many times up to now, one who arrives today and leaves tomorrow, but as the one who comes today and stays tomorrow, the potential wanderer, so to speak, who has not completely overcome the loosening of coming and going, though not moving on. And this is, when I say these 600 or 800 pages, what it is something, it's not only quite a lot of text, but it is something where you have to reflect really on this text, what it means. To think about and try really to get this understanding of being not bipolar, not schizophrenic, but to be in a way two people. To be there and not to be there, to come, to arrive, and at the same time to be already part of this. And this is the difficulty, I think, at least I would not be aware of it, that this had been used for an analysis in terms of academic work, thinking about research. But to think about it, in a way, this is what we are doing, or what we should be doing, of coming into a field, arriving there, where we don't know anything about this field. In a way, we don't even know if it exists. We just have an idea of it. Because, of course, we have an idea. We know that, another work of Elias, that sport exists. We know that shopping centers do exist. We know that universities do exist. But what it means is first and foremost something we experienced, we have some knowledge about it, be it literally from our experience, or from what we have been told. And with this we go there. And with this we build up the understanding of something, a merger of our experience and what is really there. Of course, you can measure what a university is. You can calculate it. I don't know how many students, how many lecturers, how many people working in the background, so to say, administration and computer people and cleaning people, security. And this is the interesting thing, actually. If you are a stranger, you see how it works in different places. What trust means, which you usually wouldn't recognize. If you are there, that's what you are used to. What a certain kind of friendliness means. This is something you are used to. But as stranger, you mention it in a different way. You think, right, you can do it this way as well. And this is, I think, something we have to try to maintain in research. You can simply say curiosity. Curiosity, always thinking, it is not what I know. It is not what I constructed already in my mind with my experience, with my real world experience, but it is something, this curiosity of being a stranger, of being there. But this is the other side. I never arrived there. I'm always still arriving, because I always see something new. And this is something, if you travel literally now in this traditional way, you will find, even in your own country or in your own city. I lived in one city there, I mentioned it especially, that I walked kind of permanently for years the same way. And I always, again and again, saw something new. More details. Details I just ignored, I didn't think about it. It was just a wall, plain wall. And after 2 years, you know the little stones, which is history. I walked once with a friend through Paris. She did a little guiding tour for me, and I said afterwards, I think you know every stone personally. She was actually a stranger. She was from the Pyrenees, moved to Paris, and was hugely interested in history. And this is why I say that there is so much history even in buildings, in the details. The degree of renovation, what is renovated. I heard this the other day, and then you can come from there. I'm not phenomenologist, but I think it is a reasonable way of approaching things as well. You come from there, you come here to Łódź, and of course the Manufaktura is one of the centers. Then you think, well, it's interesting. An old enterprise building, huge complex, being used now as a shopping center. And then you come there and you think, okay, it's shopping center and restaurants, places where to meet. But then you see as well, there is more to it. It's a place of socialization, whatever it means. You think, is it just to attract people, or is it more? Is it really the space where people go today? You ask on. And then I'm quite used to Auchan due to French link. I always send, when I see Auchan, I send something, a picture, a photo to my friends and say, listen, you are never lost here. Wherever you go, Auchan is there. And then you hear, actually, there was a conflict about Auchan coming here. I didn't know this. It was not just Auchan coming here and opening a shop in the Manufaktura, but apparently it is an investment project by Auchan. And the other shops, including the Polish shops, are guests of Auchan. And then you hear further, and I didn't do research there, but then you hear further there was a conflict between the city and Auchan, actually, because Auchan wanted the Manufaktura, but did not want the living spaces around. Apparently not anymore, but at that stage, kind of social problem areas. So they said, yeah, okay, we invest there, it's good for the city, but you have to look after your problems yourself. So this is a problem, and then, of course, you have to check what is correct and how did it develop, and what happened afterwards, because what I heard is that the social problem area is not, at least not to such extent, a problem area anymore, but things to move on, to come there as a kind of stranger. And it is actually something, second kind of longish quote where it points to another region of strangeness, of being a stranger. We have this, I'll come back to this later, we have this distinction between science and social science. For whatever reason, being in any case social scientist, even as economists we are social scientists, I faced this directly as a conflict because we wanted to have an initiative as social scientists and saying this is an offer of science to the public. It was a social science project in terms of, as scientists, we should be there for the people. If they cannot afford, for instance, an expertise on the quality of water or on the traffic issues or on whatsoever, we should offer the service to the people. Because they cannot pay it. Auchan can pay it, but not people who are living around it. So this was at one university, and we said we should go on this, move on this way, and there was I don't know if he was dean or vice president of this university, and he said, but you cannot claim to be scientist, because the name of this was Science Shop. It was an international thing. You are not scientist. I said, sorry, what? And he insisted, you are not scientist. And this was just because science for him was, actually I think he was mathematician. So there you start with that science. Biology is science. Why is it? Because in these cases we have the impression, come later to this with this quote, we have this impression, this is set in stone and this is exact. We know exactly in biology what happens. In physics. And of course we know in maths especially, we know exactly what happens. Why? Because from the outset we have something, actually we have it in economics as well, ceteris paribus, I don't know if you came across it, under the condition that we exclude actually anything else. Under the condition that nothing else changes, this goes this way. Ceteris paribus. Great. So if we fade out reality, then it will be in this way. And if we calculate 1 plus 1, it is 2. We say 1 is the plus 1 and not the minus 1. Fading that out, because minus 1 plus 1 is 0. So in any case, we have strictly axiomatic conditions and they are set and they are defined, and with this we can be exact. Now the question is, it's always a kind of funny thing if you talk about geniuses and say they had been wrong. Einstein, when he was really on the height of his success, he was kind of wrong. There was this conflict, and I don't know about the details really, I'm not a scientist, and supposedly nobody understood Einstein really, let alone Heisenberg. And what came after Einstein, this was quantum physics, quantum mechanics, which apparently, and there we are with the terms wrong, they wronged Einstein. Not in terms of this was absolutely wrong, but in terms of we have to move on from there, and this was a condition laid by Einstein, that Heisenberg, then one of the quantum theoretical people, said, since the system could not be the object of measurements, and of theoretical investigations. It would in fact not belong to the world of phenomena if it had no interactions with such bigger system of which the observer is part. The interaction with the bigger system, with its undefined microscopic properties, then introduces a new statistical element into the description, both the quantum theoretical and the classical one, of the system under consideration. So if you read on, it's again something for slow reading. If you read on, you will understand there is a constructivist element even in what we call science, in physics. I don't know if you came across Schrödinger's cat. There you are. It is not absolutely arbitrary. This cat is alive or dead, and it is not both. But at the same time, even there you have this space of possibilities. Depending on the interaction with this environment, with the complexity, with the combinations you have. So, and this is the major problem, I think. In any case, be it science, be it social science, be it sociology, political science, law, whatsoever, we have this problem of we are not strangers. We avoid, and this is actually the aim, if you want, of research, we avoid being stranger. We want to have exactly, we want to know something, and we want to know it exactly. And we want to get rid of contradictions. The entire process of research is exactly about this. You have a hypothesis and you try to prove it, which means you take counter-arguments as anticipation and say, but there is this argument against my argument, against my hypothesis. So what will I do? I will try to prove that the counter-argument is not valid. Now, there are different ways of doing it. Ceteris paribus is one, and you simply say, yeah, it's fine, you are right. But I only speak about this very, 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 very specific case. So individualization of the case. Then it is true. All other possibilities left aside. Or I look at what is actually interfering from the other side. The stone falls down, as we say. After Einstein, we say, well, it falls, but relative. We know about the law, why it is relative. And then we can say, actually, the stone doesn't fall at all down. It stops here, it goes there. So what's wrong? It still falls down, believe me. If you take this thing away that keeps it going to the side, it falls down. If you stand in the wrong position, well, this was the Newton story, apparently with the apple, finding it on his head. So, but we try to figure out what is actually what are the detailed conditions under which certain things happen or do not happen. And this is the advantage and at the same time the danger within which we are. A final quote, really. It's by Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolution. Kuhn was working on what was known then, what was getting known as a paradigm shift. In a very, very simple way, he said, actually, we are always doing the same. Never something new. Up to a certain point, and then there is a paradigm shift and something new comes up. But up to then, and these paradigm shifts are rare, up to then we are basically doing always the same. We are looking for more details, we are looking for, this had been true in 1950, is it true in 1960, is it true in 2000 or in 2020. Even then we try to look from this, is it true in 2020 or 2050? Basically looking in the same way with the same paradigm. Perhaps these are defects. The areas investigated by normal science are, of course, minuscule. The enterprise now under discussion has drastically restricted vision. Restriction. You are not stranger. But those restrictions born from confidence in a paradigm turn out to be essential to the development of science. By focusing attention upon a small range of relatively esoteric problems, the paradigm forces scientists to investigate some part of nature in detail and depth that would otherwise be unimaginable. And normal science possesses a built-in mechanism that ensures the relaxation of the restrictions that bound research whenever the paradigm from which they derive ceases to function effectively. At that point, scientists begin to behave differently, and the nature of their research problems changes. In the interim, however, during the period when paradigm is successful, the profession will have solved problems that its members could scarcely have imagined and would never have undertaken without commitment to the paradigm. So you have the two sides. On the one hand, you have to do what you have to do. You have to look into details. Otherwise, we still would think the world is flat. We had to follow this paradigm until we then did not think anymore about the world is not flat, but a globe. But there are actually many Earths, many moons, many different planets of the same qualitative level, if you want. It is not this one worldview that could be maintained for a long time. Which is, of course, very difficult then when we come to research questions in more details. I'll briefly only talk about it and then we can discuss it. 4 points, the academic's relation to the subject area. So are we stranger to the subject area or are we part of it? And in which way are we part of it? That's always the problem for us to understand really. On the one hand, if we are not part of it, we have an outsider view. We may have a stranger, the view of a stranger kind of going into it, but we always have, or usually have, different criteria. If we talk about business, if we research on business issues, we are not businessmen, business people, which means we have different criteria. We always have to think about what does it actually mean for this person, if it means anything. Even this, to imagine it could be not meaning anything. And looking into details means as well never come up with this vision we have, or with this prejudice, if you want. There are so many things involved, and we have to explore them. How do we do it? On the one hand, we refer to what we have, the knowledge we have, and the knowledge we have, hugely important. I'm a friend of this, in libraries. I don't know why, I just wrote something, an email or something about this, the appreciation of books, of libraries. This is had been an advantage, personal privilege, if you want, of being a stranger. I worked in Palazzo Farnese in Rome, or in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, which is actually, people come there. It's part of the museum, and people come there. This is a public place. The Farnese is closed, so they come there and look at the beauty of the exhibited books. And I was sitting there and working away, and a youngish man with 2 children came there, and I got the impression he was saying something. Look, this is how they were ages ago. They had been sitting there over books and writing something with a fountain pen. So, yeah, okay. And you have all this reference material there, and it is more and more accessible. Not because of the internet. It is more and more accessible also over the internet. But I'm still a friend of this appreciation of the not necessarily old library. I worked in Taiwan. There was a huge, really, it was a purpose building. It was library and nothing else. It was not nice in terms of beauty. But to work there, to be able to explore this material, the wealth of material that is there, it's amazing. And it is amazing, something where we often don't understand it really. In terms of handwriting, there are apparently 80 different movements in handwriting. And it's not about moving the pen, but something else. With a keyboard, it's limited to, 10 or something. So this is the process of appropriating knowledge as well. That you work in a different way. As much as I just said, or emphasized to appreciate this knowledge that is in books, we are going to this way of everything has to be referenced. If it's not referenced, it doesn't count. And I was reading, kind of fun reading. I first thought it's absolutely useless to read the philosophy of walking. How can you write about the philosophy of walking? But actually there was a nice paragraph of, if you walk, if you walk, not intentionally, but if you walk, your spirit is free. You think in a different way. You don't think, where did I read it, and who said this as well, and can I reference it? Is there an argument against it? But it is this just walking and getting inspired, but as well allowing your thoughts to be free, to flow freely with the environment and with your own thoughts. This is the kind of balance you should try to strive as well. Coming to this process, what I just quoted from Heisenberg, there are different combinations as well. And you have to look at which of the combination is a valid one. And this means as well to reflect permanently again on the academic, the relationship of the academic to the academic. This is a matter simply being amongst colleagues, peers as they are called today, and then as well between, for instance, colleagues from different disciplines, different disciplinary backgrounds, or younger colleagues, older colleagues. And believe me, you're always in between. You're never young or you're never old. There's always somebody older or somebody younger, and you have to figure out what is this. There is a now this is a kind of general issue, phobia and phobia sociale. We always want to be part. This first one is about I'm afraid that nobody recognizes me, that I'm forgotten, that I'm not part of it. And the other is the social phobia. It's I'm kind of who am I? I'm nothing. I'm just disappearing in the mass. And this is something where literally in research we have this problem. I did not have it in this way. We have had other things. You are expected already as PhD student to publish something. Meaning, and not only to publish something, but to publish in this and that journal. I don't know how, when I published my first thing, I was so proud and oh gosh, that was kind of mature, I thought mature academic. But things change. Now the question is, if you have to publish in this and the journal, you kind of disappear. Or you have something outstanding that is permanently quoted. Whatever outstanding is, may write outstanding rubbish if it's good enough to be, or important enough to be recognized. Then your quotes, your ranking goes up. It happened. People writing something that had been so contested, it was obviously wrong, but people engaged with it. So it was actually the person who wrote something wrong, who went up in his ranking, and the others disappeared because everybody was talking about this. Paradox. This is a problem we face, which means as well we have to think about what is important for me to say. Is it important for me to say something that is published, or is it important that I say, I risk that this is not mainstream? I risk that this is, for instance, something that is going so much into detail that nobody is interested in it, to publish it. I think it was the first article I had to review for a journal. I said, this is excellent, but there will be probably 3 readers who are interested in it. It's so specialized in everything, in terms of methods applied, in terms of topic. I think you shouldn't publish it. So this is something, and I think the person did really good work and tried to get it out there, and said something. It is not really the top topic of interest, but it is worthwhile to be said. And then you have this kind of, which is in a way linked to it. It was a stranger in life, actually, a Snow, called Snow. The name was Snow. Forgot the first names. Writing about the 2 cultures and saying we have the split, and confirmed it basically, between science and he was referring to literature, which goes so far that people don't talk to each other. It's kind of a different culture as well, into a different culture of thinking, and this is important. This is important, getting more important in terms of, do we adopt a general culture? And the general culture is today something that I would call utilitarianism with individualism. Is it utilitarianism is an old concept from economics about the happiness of everybody, the greatest happiness for everybody. Is it about individual happiness, that somebody can immediately do something with this knowledge we produce? Or is it really this kind of understanding what reality is about? Is it about ceteris paribus understanding of details and nothing else is relevant? Or is it really about something that took a long time for me to understand? There is a beauty in mathematical calculations, equations. There's a beauty in it. And it is something, if you are not mathematician or economist, you won't see this beauty. I still don't know if it's justified to use this term beauty. But I think there is this fascination, there is this complexity within it. And this is something worthwhile to maintain, as well in terms of approaching the thing of don't cut the beauty off. And this is something, unfortunately, we do this kind of misunderstanding of what certain things mean. We do in social science in many cases. We just have our calculations without understanding the context, without understanding the entirety of what we are looking at. Even if it is a detail, we have to understand, or we have to try to understand this complexity from where it comes. I would not say everything could be different, but in a way there is some truth in it that everything could be different. So you have to look at this academic as a stranger in culture, to look at moving within cultures and across borders, looking at different languages, even if it is your own language. Look at from where do terms come. We use them in many cases without thinking. Again, we know what it is. And then we look it up and say, from where does it actually come? Of course, it is easier for the stranger. In German, you say, in English you say that the early bird catches the worm. The second mouse gets the cheese, but okay, leave it with the early bird catches the worm. In German you say, the hour of the morning, Morgenstund hat Gold im Mund. The hour of the morning has gold in the mouth. And I was talking with a friend of mine, and she said, why do the Germans actually say this? What's the point? You don't want to have gold for breakfast. Where I said, yeah, it's actually true. So I didn't check from where this term or this phrase comes, but even sometimes you find it in single words. The origin and going back to the actual meaning and trying to explore it there, which is then as well the fourth point I made here, the academic as a stranger in terms of reality. In a certain way, it's usually expressed as theory and practice relationship. There is the practice, this is the reality, and we are looking in our ivory tower, we are sitting there and doing the work, observing from outside. Of course, it is never entirely true, But at the same time, there is some truth in it in terms of having our models. And models are hugely important and hugely dangerous. Again, we work with the models, we model the world, if you want, forgetting about reality. And there's a beautiful book on two academics, if you want. And there you find the two cultures, you find two different approaches, and you find two different ways of dealing with reality. It is the measurement of the world. It's the story of Gauss, mathematician, and Humboldt. And Gauss was sitting there and doing everything by calculation. Today, mathematics and everything that is linked to mathematics would not exist. It's like, probably I'm not entirely correct, but Pythagoras, Gauss, and then the rest, forget it. It had been details. Now, the other was just the opposite, saying, forget this. You have to explore the world. And he was literally traveling, trying to understand people in other countries, trying to experience measurement of the world in terms of experience distance. You can look, especially today, you can look at distance, at dimensions, even on the computer. You have all the measurements there. You go to Google and you get some figures out of it, and you say, well, actually, I wanted to know where this is, what's the name of this place. It happened to me recently. I was somewhere and I wanted to write it down in my calendar. You have the option there, which position, and then you have the option, my calendar had this, is it the current position? I said yes, and then instead of getting a street name, I got the figures there. I still don't know where it is. If somebody else would ask me, I say, okay, yes, it's here, look. And where is it? I said, just around the corner. So you have the two ways, and you have the two ways of exploring things. And the difficulty, I think, is to be in both areas, in both cultures, maintain this kind of spirit of the stranger. Arrive there, go there, not to say, okay, I'll do this and leave it immediately again, but try to do it as well if you are within it, if you stay within it. That you say, still I have this curiosity, which is, and there I come to the end, which is necessary as well to look at possibilities. Whatever we have, if we analyze anything, in terms of social behavior, in terms of which part of social behavior, in terms of institutions, or in terms of development, is about it could be different. Because everything at the end of the day is based on a few parameters only. It's power. It is the knowledge with which we can use the power, and it is interest. How, for what do we use it? And this is, fortunately or unfortunately, a huge advantage. I say unfortunately because we run into the traps, as Einstein did, as many of these people did, working on something where they said afterwards, I'm talking now about the nuclear bomb, atomic bomb, we should not have done this. When they did it, they had been convinced this is the only right thing to do. At the same time, it means we have the opportunity, we are challenged to do something of which we actually do not know exactly what is going to happen, where we have to think about what is going to happen, and where we have to take risks as well. And this is, I think, important, all these topics you are working on, to look for something new, and at the same time to think about the responsibility. For whom do you do it? And what is the risk? There is this risk if you teach people reading, they read the wrong stuff. I don't know if it really was a joke or if it was really something where people thought this explicitly this way. Yes, women should be able to read as well, because it was an issue. Get women into the universities. So you start with they have to read as well, but actually we only want them to read the instructions for the whatever they need. And then they could read other stuff as well. And this is always the problem with knowledge. If you give knowledge to others, they can make use out of it. And this is reading. This is reading as well. It's about women being reading. It's about as well giving children something they can use. It's always about the control as well. To which extent should we control what we are giving away? Or where we should say, actually, now we know this and we know this is just too dangerous to give it in an uncontrolled way to somebody else. Political issue, public issue, social issue, and our relationship to reality. Reality is the people out there, and reality is the politicians out, I don't know, I think it's also, right? Well, it's central governments, it's international governments, it's whatsoever. So I conclude there and hope we can discuss.
De la fin du passé, faisons table rase, fous l'esclave debout, debout. Le monde va changer de base, nous ne sommes rien, soyons tous. C'est la lutte finale, groupons-nous, et demain, l'international sera le genre humain. Il n'est pas de sauveur suprême, ni Dieu, ni César, ni tribun. Travailleurs, sauvons-nous nous-mêmes, décrétons le salut commun. Pour que le voleur rende gorge, pour tirer l'esprit du cachot. Soufflons nous-mêmes notre forge, battons le fer quand il est chaud. C'est la lutte finale. Groupons-nous, et demain, l'international sera le genre humain. Ces paroles qui trottent dans la tête des opprimés du monde entier sont celles d'un de nos poètes qui s'appelait Eugène Potier. Aujourd'hui, le monde a changé Est-ce qu'il y a moins d'exploités, de chômeurs, d'enfants affamés, pour qu'on puisse se reposer, de chanter, de chanter, de chanter, de chanter. C'est la lutte finale. Groupons-nous et demain l'international sera le genre humain.